Welcome to Parenting GPS, navigating your parenting journey. I'm Kari Kling, the host of your show. I've been working with families for a little over 40 years, and in my parent coaching and other people I speak with, I hear the buzzwords executive function. And what I've learned is that most parents have a little bit of a different take on what that really means. Well, today's guest, pediatric psychologist Dr. Lynne Kenney, is going to help us set the record straight, tell us what executive function is, how we can help our children to gain those skills, and why it's really the missing link in so many areas of behavior and learning and planning and on and on and on. So it is my pleasure to read the bio to you for Dr. Lynne Kenney and introduce her to you. Dr. Lynne Kenney is the nation's leading pediatric psychologist in the development of classroom cognitive physical activity programs for students grades K through 8. Dr. Kenney develops curriculum, programming, and activities to improve children's cognition through coordinative, cognitive motor, movement, executive function, skill building strategies, and social emotional learning. Dr. Kenney is a pediatric psychologist on the language and cognition team at Wellington Alexander Center for the treatment of dyslexia in Scottsdale, Arizona. She has advanced fellowship training in forensic psychology and developmental pediatric psychology from Massachusetts General Hospital, Harvard Medical School, and Harbor UCLA Medical School. As an international educator, researcher, and author, Dr. Kenney is dedicated to improving the trajectory of children's learning, particularly in high-need, low-income communities. Dr. Kenney, thank you so much for being here.
It's my pleasure. You know what I'm aware of now is how many multisyllabic words are in that intro. I should really clean it up because it's easy to read and hard to say. So go you, Kari.
It's wonderful. And I could give you an intro for probably 20 minutes straight, and I would barely cover all of the accomplishments that you have had and that in ways that you have helped children. And before we get started, I have to just share with our viewers that we've known each other long enough that you taught a class years and years ago, which I took from you, and it was virtual, but it was on the telephone.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was a phone class, so we go way back. Anyway,
I know we've used so many different types of technologies to share information over the years, and I love video. I love that we can be human and be friendly and take questions from our colleagues and our parents who are listening. So I'm ready to dive in.
I am so happy to have you here. And as I said in the intro, Dr. Kenney, so many parents perhaps have a different idea about what is executive function, and it's so important. Could I ask you to please take a few minutes and let's define what is executive function? What are the skills and processes? And why is it so important for our kids?
Yeah, it truly is the missing link. So thank you for bringing that front of mind for us. So I'm not going to go on and on. I'm just going to kind of chat, and then you can ask a question, or maybe the people who are watching will have questions. But I think that it's important to recognize that there is no one definition of executive function. Okay. But I've been teaching about executive function for 20 years, and my specific course, 30 interventions, has been active since 2013. So I have slowly developed my own definitions based on my interaction with children and colleagues and parents. So what I would say about executive function is that it's a collection of self-regulatory control processes that are divided into different domains. So by self-regulatory control, I mean that, like, I'm excited to be talking with you today, right? So I have to exercise some cognitive control over my level of excitement in order for us to have this great conversation. And so my executive function skills allow me to do that. They help me to hold information in my working memory. Who am I speaking with? What are we talking about? Are there any special things that I want to make sure I get out today? They help me inhibit not get too excited, manage my energy so I'm not just a fire hose, right? They help your executive function skills, they help you maintain your control of attention. You know, you're going to take a turn talking, I'm going to take a turn talking. So I have to be attentive to who's speaking and where we're going with our conversation. And they help us with cognitive flexibility. So every time I get on a video broadcast like this, things don't go as we planned. That's part of life. And so we have to flex. Maybe I have some things I want to say, and you've got some other interests. So cognitive flexibility is important too. So that's basically what executive function is. And it has these sub skills beneath it in different domains. And what we do in life is assess those domains, provide personalized intervention in those domains, be it organization, task completion, et cetera, and then we monitor the outcomes. We do progress monitoring with pre and post testing.
Yes, and one of the things that we know is that, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later in the show, is that executive function and the skills and processes that go along with that look different at different ages. But the question that I have for you right now is, for our viewers, how would you respond to the question, are executive function skills, is it something that happens naturally? Do they have to be taught? Can parents do things to support them and speed them up? And I know we're going to talk more about this as each segment goes on, but just generally, how would you respond to that?
There's so much to say to that question. So the important thing is that some executive function skills are built in your brain and ready to go at birth. As an example, because they're instinctual. So as an example, when the baby comes out and it needs to eat, it has the motor planning skills and the attention skills to get where it needs to go. So a lot of people I interact with think executive function skills are for like older kids, but I love them for infants, toddlers, absolutely. And what I would say is I've got lots of sayings and songs that I do with the children. And one of my sayings with them is executive functions are cognitive skills, and cognitive skills can be learned. So the way we parent, and I've got some sentence examples that I'll give you today, the way that we parent and interact with our children in the classroom, in getting into the car in the morning, sitting, having breakfast, putting them to bed at night, you're doing executive function training and teaching throughout the entire day with your children.
And you know what? Let's dive into all of this when we come back from our break. For those of you watching, I promise you, you're going to look at what it means, what executive function processes and skills means differently by the end of the show. And I'm so excited to be able to share it with you. We'll be right back. In the first segment, we just started to dive in, Dr. Kenney, about executive function. And so what I want to ask you to share with our viewers now is why is executive function so important, and why is it the missing link?
Such a great question. So your executive function skills basically manage all of your goal-directed behavior. I like to tell the children when I teach them about their executive function skills that your executive function skills help you be a successful pro-social animal. And I sometimes say, what kind of animal do you want to be? And I play all sorts of games with them. What a lot of people don't know, because this research is really across the last 10 to 15 years, is that executive function, including metacognition, is a better predictor of academic, social, and lifelong employment and relational success than is IQ. For many, many people, and particularly in children who are in under-resourced communities.
And may I just ask you to clarify something for our viewers that may not be sure? When you mentioned metacognition, could you just share a little bit, when you say that, could you just give a brief definition, please?
Yeah, so some people consider metacognition one of the executive function skills. When I think of executive function skills, I think of little categories like organization, planning, previewing, prioritizing, time management, right? Self-regulation, self-control, response inhibition, cognitive flexibility. There's many of them. The thing about metacognition is that there's research from Philip Zelazo and his colleagues at University of Minnesota that shows that simply raising the self-reflective ability of a child improves their utilization of their executive function skills. So metacognition technically is, I recognize that I'm thinking about thinking.
Mhm.
And so I use metacognition to say all my little sentences that I'll go into when we talk about intervention. Using metacognition is basically raising a child's self-awareness that they have thoughts, they think about thoughts, and that they can impact their thoughts with their knowledge. And
Mhm.
it's very empowering. I call it being your brain's best coach. Like when I see a kid using their metacognition, I'm like, this is so cool. You're being your brain's best coach.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying. Keep going, please.
So I told you that, executive function is so important. And now, honestly, especially clinically, but more and more in education, we are assessing executive function skills. And the thing is that executive function skills are a robust predictor. So if I can, as an example, I've got IQ, right? Well, there's three numbers actually that are part of IQ. But in executive function skills, I've got like access to about 30 different tasks. I can assess different types of attention, focused attention, sustained attention. I can do tasks on visual working memory, auditory verbal working memory. I can do tasks on how you hold images in your mind so that you can visualize and verbalize. So executive functions and the methods that we use to assess them are just broader and more robust. The other thing is, just technically speaking, I think this is so fascinating, is that children, there's tons of research too. Like my body of work is based on 300 studies alone.
Wow.
But children with better executive function skills, so that let's just say that's better self-regulation, attention, working memory, cognitive flexibility, they get better grades in math and reading. They're better liked by not only their teachers, by their peers. They take less risk-taking behavior. They're less likely to get pregnant. They're less likely to do drugs, and they're more likely to earn high income. So if I'm in the inner city where I love to work, I am not interested in their IQ. I want to know, what are their executive function skills? What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And what can I do to pull some of those skills up?
Well, and based on something you just said, so really, so many times as parents, people are concerned with getting the knowledge, scoring well on a test on the knowledge. But if a child doesn't have those executive function skills, they're not going to know what to do with the knowledge in terms of, how do I implement this? How do I apply this to this situation? So really, executive function is the missing link at so many levels.
Specifically, it's related to everything, but what you said just rang a bell for me. I get referred in our clinical practice, children who need to learn numeracy. And I do teach them their numeracy, and I use multisensory techniques, and they leave knowing math. But what I really focus a lot on is approach to task. What's our plan? What do we need to accomplish here? I help them become more sequential thinkers. And so content is important. What the content is in the curriculum is important. What's more important is that you have the ability to implement the processes to take that information in, encode it, and turn information into knowledge.
Excellent. And one of the things, and we're going to talk about this more in the next segment, but is about, is it natural? Can it be taught? And one of the ways that you're going to share with parents is through narrative language, but it's also about modeling. And you use the language with the modeling. You just gave the example, Dr. Kenney, about numeracy and teaching math skills. Can you give us just one example of how you would model that for the kids in terms of, okay, we're going to learn whatever it is.
Okay.
Just a short example. We have about a minute.
Okay, so let's just talk about multiplying decimals as an example. When you multiply a decimal, you can have either side at the front of the problem, right? So if I've got 455 times 0.1, I can do those at either side. So I have a 4-step process. My first process is, let's look at everything on this page, and now let's organize it. Let's rewrite it all with the bigger number on the left. So there's some consistency, because in a child with dyscalculia or dyslexia, to them, it's two different equations completely. So step one, we do that. Step two, I say, okay, now let's calculate this problem, taking out the decimal. And then step 3, I teach them what the decimal means in terms of being representing a fraction, a part. And then we put the decimal back in. So that I would consider teaching sequence. First, simultaneous processing. Let's look at the whole thing. Second, sequencing. Third, organization. And then 4, execution.
Absolutely. And you made me think when
You wrote a book on math too.
I
I've
did. I
read.
wrote a book called "It's Not About Math, It's About Life." And what you reminded me of when you said that, it's not just about the academics. And we're going to talk about this more in the next segment. But even when you say to a young child, clean your room, there's a whole task analysis, a whole prioritization. We've got to model it because it's can be too overwhelming. So when we come back, we're going to continue with your wonderful, wonderful content and begin to give parents some more examples of what they can do with their children the minute they finish watching this show.
Okay,
We'll be right
I love
back.
that.
Dr. Kenney, this has been really helpful so far, and I want to keep going. So many times when parents hear, oh, this specialist, that specialist, the first thing they think of is that's going to cost a lot of money. And the things that you're talking about today do not cost a lot of money. And so let's dive in right now about and talk a little bit more about narrative language and how we can model for kids. You gave an example with the decimals before. Let's keep going. What are some things that parents can do in and out of the classroom to help support executive function development with their children?
So, I think the first important thing to know is that you as a parent are the best coach for your child. Okay. So if you can, so you don't have to go to a doctor, we can all do it in our relationships. There is this space between us, Kari. And this is what I call the space of relationship and learning. So a few actions you can take is 1, spend time with your children off devices. Play, cook. If you're a busy working parent, no problem. You're cooking and make a little art station or something so that they or have them, do something simple like make some dough and have them make little circles out of the dough.
Be a part of it. Absolutely.
Yeah. You need to spend time with your children off screens in a relationship. This is very important. Number 2, get outside and play. We have a big deficit in vestibular and proprioceptive stimulation in our children because we no longer go up slides the wrong way. We no longer jump off swings. We sit a lot. We're on digital media a lot. So please get outside. And even if you're not athletic, just kick a soccer ball around, run, play little games running. I have a little ping pong paddle that I hit just on the cement outside. Get outside and do motoric behaviors that the kids don't have access to anymore. Motor is extraordinarily tied to cognition. And 3 is so simple. Use narrative language. Describe what you're doing. So I wrote a few examples, like as an example, you've got an 18-month-old and they're sitting at home at their seat and they spill the Cheerios and they spill the milk. Use these as opportunities to build the myelination in their brains, okay? Say, oh my gosh, what's mommy going to do with the spilled Cheerios? Oh, I guess we need to wipe it up. What will I use to wipe it up? And even if they're not talking back, it's no big deal. And don't use too many words. I segment my words. I'm modeling it just like I do now. And I say, okay, I think I'll wipe it up. But now, Jason's hungry. What shall we do now? I think we need a new one. We're walking to the fridge, and I sing along with them. We're walking to the fridge. We're walking to the fridge. When I open it, I'll see the milk. And just do that sort of stuff with them. Just describe what you're doing. Then teach them a lot about planning and previewing, because the sequence is the secret. And when you talked about cleaning up a bedroom, that is so overwhelming. And Sarah Ward does a great job in her trainings on this. It's not just cut the room into quadrants and do one thing at a time. And in one of my books, I was like, get rid of all the live things first, kind of as a joke, if you got the mice in there and the stuff, then throw away the foods and the wrappers. And slowly you get to the clothing and the shoes, et cetera, et cetera. It's so much more than that. It's in order to prevent our overwhelm, let's think about what we're going to do in which order in which part of the room. We're not even going to do the whole room. We're going to go to the door and say, all right, this is a disaster, no problem, because we're going to use our brains in order to think out what's going to be most effective. And then you're using narrative language to hear from them. You're not controlling, you're not doing it for them. They're not in trouble. So I really like the language part of it. And then, like, I just had a family, I have this probably 100 times people have said to me, in the morning, we're getting ready. They go upstairs to get their shoes. I go up 20 minutes later and they're playing with the Legos on the floor. Well, I would use narrative language to try to prevent that a little bit. I would say, now, Jeremiah, we know that playing Legos is more fun than going off to school, but I need you to go get your shoes and come right back down. So when you see your Legos and you want to play, how are you going to coach your brain? You've got to be your brain's best coach. What are you going to say? And when they keep hearing these terms, I'm my brain's best coach. I choose the focus of my attention. I can write a plan. I know how to look at the big picture, which is called previewing or simultaneous processing. That when you start to teach them this brain literacy, simply through narrative language, you're already helping improve their brains. Isn't that exciting?
It's so exciting, and to give kids, to empower kids to know that they can do it, and know it doesn't happen the first time, and maybe not even the second or the third time. And if you have older kids and you're saying to yourself as you listen to this, oh, well, my kid's 13 and I haven't even done this yet, it's not ever too late.
I have a really beautiful story. I have two. Do we have time? How much
Yes,
time do
let's
we have?
go. Absolutely.
Okay,
Let's hear
one
it.
beautiful story. I'm going to start with the teenager. So I had a mother years ago, and I, of course, totally changed the facts. But let's just pretend it was similar to this. A mother comes into my office and she's crying, and I say, how may I help you? Let's help you, experience more comfort. Why are you experiencing discomfort? And she basically said, I work all the time. I work 3 jobs and I can't play with my children. You told me to play with my children. I don't have time to play with my children. I said, okay, let's make a solution here. Okay, let's wipe your tears and make a solution. Do you like being outside? I love being outside. I never attend. Do you have a little chair where you could sit outside? Oh, yes. So the next time your child comes and says, Mom, will you play basketball with me? You say, Stefan, may I come watch? And then you can sit quietly in the chair. I actually call it perpendicular play. It's not parallel play. It's perpendicular play, because they're having fun doing their thing and you're sitting quietly present, no phones, no stuff. You're being with them. And it makes me, because now the mom came back with better tears the next time. So that's just beautiful. I think that's a good enough story. I've got another little toddler story, but that one's so touching. I think I'll leave it there.
Yeah. And I think the key is, and I talk about this all of the time in my videos, in my shows, when I work with parents one-on-one. Do what you can. It's an old quote from Will Rogers. Do what you can with what you have where you are. It's not about parents feeling guilty about, oh, here's another thing I'm supposed to be doing, and now I don't have time to do that, and now I feel even worse. It's not about that. And the example I give all of the time, I'm going to say this really quickly. If you go to a restaurant and you look at the menu and you say, oh my gosh, everything looks so good, do you feel guilty because you don't order everything? You pick and choose what you can do at that moment that will support and guide your children. And so, speaking of parents, when we come back from the break, we have 2 questions for you, Dr. Kenney, that 2 of our viewers would like you to respond to.
Okay.
We'll be right back. This is the part of the show where we take our questions from our viewers, and I like to call it your parenting destination. And we have 2 questions for you today, Dr. Kenney, and I'm going to read the first one to you right now. This is from Lorraine in Cleveland, and Lorraine writes, my 8-year-old son seems to have difficulty with his executive function skills. Does this automatically mean that he has ADD, ADHD, or some other type of diagnosis?
Well, it's wonderful that you're observing and wondering. I call this being a detective, a very loving detective. So the short answer is no, because you can have executive function deficits across many, many diagnoses, even personality disorders, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, all sorts of depression, anxiety. So the thing that I would offer to you, just generally speaking, is consider which tasks your son is having the most difficulty with. Are we talking about organizing his backpack, getting his homework done, turning his homework in? Or are we talking about hyper focusing on his media? Or are we talking about not liking change, so he's cognitively inflexible? I would try to kind of identify the category, and then that will lead you to what types of evaluation or intervention you're going to be looking into.
And also where to model, where to put
Right.
your priority as a parent in terms of, like you said earlier about with, the Cheerios, if unloading the backpack and organizing the backpack is the biggest issue, you could model it by organizing your purse in front of your child, or something else in the room. So it's that connections, if you will, from one situation to another. It's not just
Love
about
it.
organizing your backpack, it's about organization in general.
And can I just add to that? Because I love that. Remember, 99% of the time, a child's inability to do a task is not willful. It's not willful misbehavior. It's brain function and skill deficit. So I'm going to add the word model to more of my stuff now, Kari, because of you, because you're absolutely right. You have to, instead of, why is it dirty? Why is it a mess again? And I trained you, just model it. Oh my gosh, I always model. Oh my gosh, can I tell you something so funny? I modeled so much when my children were little, like, oh, where are the chocolate chips? I'm going to make cookies. Where do you think we would find the cookies? And what should I do next? That one day, true story, my 7-year-old comes to the front hall. I'm in my house now with her friend, Clara, and leans over, and I hear her say, oh, Clara, I got to tell you something. So my mom is a brain scientist, but she's really not very smart. My favorite experience.
I'm gonna repeat that. That's the best. I love it. But it's true. Little kids are not, none of us are mind readers, and we can't ever assume as parents that when our words tell our children what to do,
Right.
that's going to translate in their brains as what is in our mind. It's kind of like clean your room is, well, their version isn't what my version is, right?
So true.
Okay, our second question today is from Pete in Goodyear, Arizona. Pete writes, I have 3 children, ages 6, 10, and 12. They're all very smart, but I feel like it takes each of them forever to do any work and complete it. And I have to keep reminding them of finishing. Other than just telling them what to do over and over,
Mhm.
what else can I do?
Yeah, well, first of all, we've all been there.
Mhm.
Um, so, you have 3 children who have different needs. Even though they're all smart, they probably approach life and tasks differently. So there's one general thing I can tell you that teaching children about getting their homework done, their tasks done, that is like universally true. And that is that the sequence is the secret. So basically, most of the time when I hear that children are disorganized in this way, it's that they don't have good strategies and methods. And so they rely on the parent to keep telling them what to do in what order. When you teach a child that there is a beginning to something, a middle to something, and an end, 1, 2, 3, everything's a 1, 2, 3. And then there's lots of 1, 2, 3s. 1, 2, 3, I picked up my backpack and I went to the table and I put it down. 1, 2, 3, I opened my backpack, I pulled out my books, and I put my folder right in front of me. Life is just like this film of 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So when you start to talk your children through, what is it that you need to achieve? What is it that you need to do? How will you know when you've done this successfully? And what are you going to do in what order? Then they can kind of start to do that in their minds and even check it off on a checklist. So they start to become empowered to have a method and a strategy for success.
So important. And one of the things that we know about our brains is that our brains are pattern seekers. And
Mhm.
so without ever knowing it, our brain is saying, what's the pattern? How do I do this? And so what you're saying is you're giving them the pattern,
Mhm, mhm.
right? Excellent. And we are just about out of time, and I wish
Wow.
we had more. And I really want to invite you to come back and talk about more of this and add some other things about what does this look like with children that do have a diagnosis of whether it's dyslexia, ADD, ADHD, autism, whatever it is. We're going to keep going. And so um, I look forward to that day. But right now, would you please take a few minutes, Dr. Kenney, and share with our viewers how can they find you? How can they find your books, your social media? Tell them a little bit about your research, if you will, your playscapes. What would you like our viewers to
Oh
know?
my goodness. Well, the first thing I say is that in 28 years, I've got a lot of stuff. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So not to overwhelm anybody. Um, my books, I have 5 books and a cognitive motor movement program. They're easily found on my website and on Amazon. The last publication date for those was 2020. And I think that the 2 really, really good ones still are Bloom. And then actually Bloom Your Room is really good. And then 70 Play Activities. I'm just finishing writing. I've spent about 300 hours on a summer institute in executive function. So that will be on my social media. All of my social media is at DrLynnekenney. And hopefully next year, I'll be able to tell you about the outcome of our study regarding children's cognition and poverty, the place that I want to make the most impact. And hopefully also soon, hopefully by June, we're going to have playscapes for your homes, executive function playscapes that you can lay them down and move along in the school and at home. So just interact with me, ask questions. I share a lot of research. I'm very friendly. So if you've got any thoughts or questions, just ask anywhere on
You're
social
very
media.
friendly and very wonderful, and I'm so happy that we're doing this not on the phone, and the advancement of technology so that we can have this opportunity. And I want to thank you so much for being here and for your service to families. For all of the years that you've been doing this, you have personally impacted the lives of so many families, and I want to encourage everybody, follow Dr. Kenney on social media. Look at her website. We'll have it all here below. It should be showing right now. And thank you again for joining us.
My pleasure. It's been my honor. Have a great day.
Thanks.